Welcome back to the Uncle Jay podcast. I'm your host, Uncle Jay. Tonight, I'm here with two really good friends. We're here with Rose. How you doing tonight, Rose?
Hi, Jay. How are
How you
y'all?
doing? And we're having a small bit of technical difficulty, so we're working on getting our host here, Patrick, in. We'll see if we can bring him in now. You there, Patrick?
I am. I'm just trying to
Hey,
figure out
brother.
hey, what's up, Jay and Roseanne? I'm just trying to figure out my background so people can see me versus actually because my video's not working.
That's fine. Well, like I said, we're gonna when we get into the show and we play the show, I'm gonna remove us all from the studio, and you'll be able to tinker around with that while the episode is being played.
Okay.
But before we get started, why don't you go ahead and give the people let them know what we're about to do tonight, and explain what we're doing here with the watch party. I believe this is going to be a 5-week series, correct? We're going to do an episode once a week for the next 5 weeks. Tonight is the first episode of the
Yep.
con.
Yep.
Okay. All right. We're still experiencing a little bit of technical difficulty, but as soon as we can get Patrick back, he'll be back. But what's been going on in your world, Rose?
Well, this particular episode, okay, I met Patrick, over the computer. We were, when I say we, a group called Real Progressives was going to show episode 1 of the con on the night that they were doing a Brahmarama was doing the world premiere. Okay.
Okay.
So, we had talked and things like that, but I will tell you, I did not, I wasn't thinking about what was going to be presented. I was thinking about all the technical things and how do we get people in. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm sitting back and I'm watching episode 1 about Addie Polk. And people are going to be introduced to this 90-year-old African-American widow who lived in Ohio. And you will see her story. And Addie's story was continued and continued and continued throughout this whole country. And people were illegally thrown out of their homes, thrown to the streets. I'm not going to tell people who haven't seen it what happened.
We're gonna get to see that tonight. And one quick thing. So would I be out there to say that Addie Polk is the Rosa Parks of the 2008 financial housing crisis? Would I be out of line saying that, Pat?
No, she is, and then some.
Okay.
Yeah, what's your viewers and whomever taps into this, if we happen to leave this just available for anybody on our YouTube site, or maybe.
Well, we're live on both your YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, and we're also live on Twitter as of right now. If you go to my main account, my @McDaniel 0207, you can watch it live on Twitter right now. So,
well, my I can't get into Twitter.
I know we're going to talk about that as well,
because Elon Musk is a national security threat, and he's a jitball piece of crap terrorist as it relates to the nature of really what we're about to see here. Now, we're in the midst of this last sort of lapse of the 2024 presidential campaign, even though the Kamala Harris campaign is just getting started. But what it relates to is as we've seen Twitter, aka X, become a nauseating platform of propaganda and lies to cover up the nauseating criminality of a bozo joker, Donald Trump, who's such a piece of just garbage that this platform would have the audacity to be able to program tens of millions of lies and defamation and hate speech and all sorts of whatever you want to call it, but it's propaganda, and we all now know it. Now, why is that important to what it is we're about to do? Well, because Patrick Lovell is the single gravest threat to the corruption that created the likes of this propaganda Svengali moron, Elon Musk, and all of the other dipshit, platforms, whether it's Alex Jones, who's got to be the biggest idiot on the planet, or everybody that is associated with all things Fox, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I affectionately called Marjorie Gangrene, or Horan Hobart, or every, piece of crap stain that is literally putting the greatest country in the world in the crosshairs of the dumbest destruction, self-destruction, and wipeout in our country's history to allow fascism to become the rule of the land, the law of the land. But it all begins and ends with what we're about to show you for free, because all the American people buy our lies. And what we're introducing to you is the revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history of all time that never ended, that enabled basically the United States to become this, a private bank for the likes of Elon Musk, because the government literally provides subsidy after subsidy after subsidy and all things businesses related to Elon Musk. But on top of that, ultimately, the nature of the schemes of financialization that basically pump and dump and use all manner, shape, or form of insider trading, shorting, you name it, to basically hyperinflate the stock of Tesla, which I used to be a giant fan of because I'm all about the renewable energy paradigm. But as it turns out, Elon Musk just said, a couple of days ago, as in an interview with Donald Trump, oh, hey, you know what? Fossil fuel really isn't that big of a conundrum. We've got probably another 500 years of resources. And you know what? The fossil fuel industry has certainly kept everything going these past many decades. And of course, Donald Trump has basically said, hey, people, let's definitely run up the spigot, when right now the United States is the largest producer of gas and oil in the world. And that's all part and parcel to the larger grand scheme of things. But more importantly, as it relates to what we're going to reveal to you in the con, which is the blueprint that all of the power has lied to us nonstop for the course of the last 13 to 15 years to create this reality, that now the Kamala Harris campaign is really putting a face of normalcy, because of course Ms. Harris is a very professional, intellectual, somebody that by all intents purposes, when you compare her to the stain of Donald Trump and all the criminality and treasonous backstabbing and backbiting Joker like Gotham, this guy's all about. Basically, she is this nature of, hey, we're going to get back to normal. Yeah, but we're not going to get back to normal. The last 15 years has not been normal. I'm just going to give you one question to think of as we go into this, and everybody can have to postulate themselves. Did the founders of this country, after they won the revolution against the greatest power in the world at that time, and quite frankly in history up until that time, the English Empire, helmed by none other than King George III, but of course basically run by Parliament and the Navy and the Redcoats, which was all a conglomeration of imperial power, that the founders of this country decided, you know what, we're not going to be under your thumb. We're going to revolt. We're going to create a country of, by, and for the people based on separation of powers, because we're going to create the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and we're going to make the integrity of law above any man or company in the land. That was the idea. So knowing that is the beginning of, in order to form a more perfect union that had to battle through the Civil War and all of the Jim Crow and all the stuff that led to World War II and fascism in between, with the progressive movements of women's suffrage and human suffrage, and of course the civil rights / labor and industrial rights sort of scenarios that led to the trust busting and ultimately the New Deal. Do you think that given all of those sacrifices, that this country was set up to be able to provide billionaires free money provided illegally that gave them the entire power to buy our government and be above the law to stuff their fat, sick, disgusting propaganda face with trillions of dollars? No,
Absolutely
that's
not.
not our system. So what we're trying to do, my friends, and I'm sorry I blinked out. Maybe that's why I'm getting a little fired up. But
You're fine.
look,
That's
the
what we
bottom
need.
line is, if you can hear me out there, we've got the revelations that the entire government of the United States had to hide to allow the billionaires to get away with it, which is the ultimate betrayal to what the United States is. And the greatest entry point to understand this entire circus is none other than what you postulated correctly, Addie Polk, who is literally the Rosa Parks of the largest criminal conspiracy in the history of the world.
All right. So without a doubt, let's get to it. Do you want to take a quick minute to explain, what we're about to watch in regards to this particular episode? Because we're going to do 5 weeks of this. We've got 5 episodes. We're going to do an episode a week.
Miracle. You're going to watch the truth that the entire system cannot allow you to understand. And quite frankly, the tragedy of Addie Polk led to the miracle. And if you're religious, I promise you, you're going to see it on display here, because it was a 1 in 29 trillion dollar chance because of her unfortunate circumstances that led to the revelation that this entire freaking scheme was racketeering. It's not rocket science, it's racketeering.
All right, well, I'm going to get this started. You guys can mute up your mics if you want. Turn your cameras off, or you can leave them on and watch along. I'm going to leave mine on and watch along. I'm going to mute my mic. But without any further ado, the first episode of The Con.
We probably been to Addie Polk's house 5 to 6 times.
And each time to deliver notices of foreclosure.
Yes.
The bankers could give her more time. Her husband passed away. She was a widow, trying to keep her home. Imagine just wanting to live your last days in your home.
All I could think was, dear God, she had done everything that she felt that she could do.
We had a huge case, but the bottom line is that we didn't do anything but touch the tip of an iceberg.
Some of the most damaging behavior on Wall Street, some of the least ethical behavior on Wall Street wasn't illegal.
This was a serial, systematic enterprise using all the prestige of the Wall Street machine to do it.
Those companies preyed on not just the people, but they preyed on the circumstance that the people were in.
Addie Polk was a prime example of what predatory lending was doing to people.
The idea of being homeless. Here I am, 97 years, always had a home. My husband provided for me. And all of a sudden, I'm outdoors. And I think it was just too much.
Self-respect and pride is not what you take with you, but the village of kids you touch who relate to you. You gotta make a strong presence on this generation, because the legacy you leave could change the situation. Your forefathers fought for the freedom of man. I'm just here to remind you that if you lost again, take control of the matter. Natural law rules We're just here to remind you that it can get lost again.
I'm neither an economist or a scholar. I'm just an average American who lost my home and very nearly my family to foreclosure when the market imploded. And I've spent almost every day since trying to find out why. Once the dust settled, it quickly became clear that my story was no different than millions of other Americans. We all thought that we were alone. We all thought that we'd failed. But none of us really knew why.
It was a series of unfortunate events in the life of an American family. It was a snowball. Avalanche, man.
Walking around pretending like it's not scary every day so that they're not scared is difficult.
Jay told me a couple weeks ago, he said, it's home because we're here. But, home can be anywhere. And I said, yeah, but it's ours. Or it was.
The media also sifted through the wreckage for answers, and it wasn't long before one camp firmly placed blame on millions of reckless borrowers who they claimed took out loans they could never afford. Once they stopped being able to pay their bills, they took the entire economy down with them.
The reason we're in this mess is because millions of Americans bought big homes way over their income level, and they're responsible too.
Who's exactly to blame for the housing crisis? Well, there's plenty of blame to go around. Home buyers who paid extra fees to avoid documenting their income should have known they were getting in over their heads.
They didn't get a house, so they couldn't have a part of the American dream because of the big evil bank. I should put horns on the big evil bank.
How about this, President and new administration? Why don't you put up the referendum to see if we really want to subsidize the losers' mortgages, or would we like to reward people that could carry the water instead of drink the water? This is America. How many of you people want to pay for your neighbor's mortgage that has an extra bathroom and can't pay their bills? Raise their hand.
How about we all stop paying our mortgage? It's a moral hazard.
Conversely, if you've seen any number of movies over the past few years, you may have heard the opposite story, that it was the big banks, armed with complicated terms like subprime, securitization, and credit default swaps, who were the real culprits in this whole fiasco. So which is it?
We did not cause the financial crisis. I do not think that we did anything wrong.
In your view, nothing illegal has occurred. Can you say that unequivocally?
It is my belief that nothing unethical and nothing illegal has happened.
The activity was clearly illegal. It was a violation of a whole series of laws that make it felonies.
Jamie Dimon's the crook. He's taking $4 trillion in U.S. funds. This guy should be going to prison. This man is a crook.
You created the mess we're in. I cannot believe no one's prosecuted you on this.
Not one of the executives on Wall Street has been charged with anything. That is what power is about. That is what corruption is about. And that is what has to change in the United States of America.
In the face of these conflicting and often complex narratives, it can seem impossible to ever truly know what caused 2008. But it's not. I started this journey to find out why I'd lost my home and to share my own experience. But it soon became clear that there was another story that could better explain what happened in 2008 and to the world ever since. Akron, Ohio is significant for many reasons. Not only is it the quintessential all-American town and among the first and hardest hit by the crisis, but more importantly, it was the home of Addie Polk.
At the age of 90, Addie Polk found herself in foreclosure this week, about to be forced from the home she's lived in for nearly 40 years. So with a gun in her hand, the Akron widow apparently shot herself in the chest as deputies were knocking on her door with eviction papers in hand.
The road to truly understanding the 2008 financial crisis starts with one simple question. Who was Addie Polk?
Addie Polk was a member of our church, committed. Addie was also a great cake maker. Her favorite cake was the sock it to me cake. And every time we had something, We put Addie Pope Sock It To Me cake.
She was a beautiful dresser all the time. She was some of the best. And I said, I love the hat you have on. I said, I like it. She said, you like it? I said, yes. She took it off of her head and put it on my head. I said, are you giving me this? So I still have the hat at my house. And she was that kind of person.
I knew her and I knew her husband well. They were very loving couple, very loving couple.
During the time where her husband was alive, she could have moved out of the neighborhood. She could have moved to a bigger house, but that was her neighborhood, and that was her house that her and her husband bought. A senior who owns their home and is paid for, when you've never owned anything, that is a major accomplishment in your life. And if you can die owning your home, no matter how big or how small it is, that is a major, major accomplishment. During that time, there were so many mortgage companies in the area. I mean, they were actually cold calling. They would walk into a neighborhood and knock on doors and say, I see you have this problem. I see you got a problem with your roof. I see you got gutters down.
And they would paint such a great picture. I mean, if you didn't really could read in between the lines, you would say, gee, I could use that. I think with her, she needed a roof, I think it was. And I think she wanted the porch fixed. So they could say, we can do this or we can do that for this amount. This will save you this and whatever.
She would have been someone who would have said, I want this house to be a reflection of what me and my husband wanted this house to be.
She always took care of her business, always took care of her business. But then in back of my mind, I knew that you could be tricked because I'd seen it so many times before. Seen it so many times before.
Lolita Adair, an Akron-based realty broker and fair housing activist, was all too familiar with the strange uptick in lending to poorer neighborhoods. When Addie's story made headlines, Lolita took it upon herself to get to the bottom of it.
I tell people I got into real estate not for monetary goals, but more for social goals. And that has kept me interested, dealing with banks and bankers, lies and liars for over 50 years. The reason Addie Polk came into my knowledge was the fact that her home was being foreclosed on. When I started putting together her life from all of the public records, I could see what had happened. She had her first loan in 1997, and that was for $21,000. But in 2001, Countrywide gives her a loan of $46,400 on a home that wasn't worth more than maybe 20.
If you need a lender who actually finds ways to make loans, call Countrywide. We're America's #1 home loan lender. No one can do what Countrywide can.
From 2001, Countrywide comes back in 2004. And this time we take out a loan for $45,600. Well, what happened to the $46,400? How can they pay that off when they just made that loan in 2001? Well, the way they do that is we also had filed on that same day an $11,380 home equity. Now, you're telling me that this home is worth $57,000 in a neighborhood where the houses might be selling in the teens. The loan should have never, ever been made. So in 2007, things had gotten behind, and we're going to file foreclosure on you. And that's what they did.
We probably had been to Addie Polk's house 5 to 6 times.
And each time to deliver notices of foreclosure?
Yes, knock on the door or just leave a note on the door, about the document with the phone numbers and everything to call the office,
The house was posted, they'd go back and the postings had been taken down. And I'm sure this was an embarrassment. She didn't want anyone who knew her to see her house posted.
The idea of being homeless. Here I am, 90-some years, always had a home. My husband provided for me. He left me the pension or Social Security. And all of a sudden, I'm outdoors. And I think it was just too much. It was just too much for her.
To think that she was going through so many sleepless nights. But she knew what day they were coming.
I was devastated. The church was devastated. None of us knew. None of us. I sat behind her for almost 20-some years on the deaconess ministry. I always sat behind her. Never had an inkling. Never.
Addie Polk was a prime example of what predatory lending was doing to people. I think there was a woman 2 doors down from her. She was in the same boat. You can go down that street and find others who were losing their homes. If I pulled up the county records, you can see that they were getting the same kinds of loans.
Before 2008, we had 3 deputies, as far as back as I can remember, from the 90s that did this job. No longer. We had to have 7 deputies to keep up on it. When we talked to each other about, how many do you have for that area and that area, you get the sense that, this is not normal.
Foreclosures were running rampant throughout the poorest neighborhoods in Akron, but as it soon became apparent, the epidemic was spreading. Around the same time that Addie's home went into foreclosure, Becky Wiese, a resident of Clinton, Ohio, a suburban town about 20 miles west of Akron, found herself in a similar predicament.
I own the house. I had the deed to the house. There was no mortgage on the house. My parents actually took the equity from their home, took the cash and bought this home. And me and my 2 children lived here by ourselves. And
What year was that?
1999.
That's when you first moved into the house with
Yes.
your 2 children.
Yes.
And your parents purchased the house.
Yes.
With their equity.
Yes.
So it's paid.
Completely paid for. It was in my dad, my mom, and my name.
Okay. By 2006, Becky was married, and with her and her husband's combined income, they were making enough to comfortably take out a loan to finally pay back her parents. So she reached out to Tom Coutura, an area loan broker with Ohio Lending Solutions, to take out a 30-year mortgage. But on the day Coutura's agent came by for the loan signing, Becky and her husband noticed inconsistencies between what she and Tom Coutura had spoken about and the documents provided to her. Instead of the 30-year mortgage they were expecting, the papers were for a 15-year balloon, a type of mortgage where you only make minimum payments for the life of the loan, but are hit with a huge final balloon payment to cover the remaining principal balance. Becky immediately got Tom on the phone.
Talking to my broker, I'm like, you told me I was getting a certain interest rate. This man's in my house and he's telling me a different interest rate. And I was told those are typos. So
You were told they were typos.
Typos. They wanted me to sign that day because they were from Cleveland, which is 45, 50 minutes away. We were hesitant to do that. And, signed a separate document saying that they were going to overnight me the corrected papers, made sure they gave me the phone numbers to resend the loan if they're not telling me the truth or I didn't feel comfortable. So I really did look at that paper and I thought, they're telling the truth.
Becky reluctantly signed the papers and waited for the corrected ones to be sent the next day. But after 2 days passed with nothing in the mail, and now having just 1 day left to rescind the loan, Becky couldn't wait any longer. She scrambled to call, email, and fax every number and address Couture had given her to rescind the loan, but couldn't get anyone to respond. Ultimately, she was able to get a fax through, which was verified as received. Finally, not long after, she received a letter from her bank in the mail. But instead of a confirmation that her loan had been successfully rescinded, Becky was stunned to find herself holding a bill saying that her first payment was due.
As soon as I found out the loan didn't rescind, I probably had every attorney in the greater Akron area. And the answer every time was, you signed it. It's been 3 days. And I'm like, but I have a problem with the resend. Here's proof that I rescinded. And the broker gave me his phone number and his emails and his fax to resend. So when I was resending to the person who just committed a crime. So
Of course.
it wasn't the real bank.
Not only had Becky and her husband been duped into signing a contract for a 15-year balloon, but they also found that, just like Addie, the value of their house had been inflated. The home's original appraisal value of $74,000 suddenly jumped to $87,000.
They stole my equity out of the house. They stole it the day I signed the papers, and you could never refinance. You know, I tried to refinance the summer that I bought the house, like just a couple months later, and they're like, I'm sorry, you can't. Try again next year.
Becky had fallen victim to an expertly orchestrated scam. But having been onto it from early on, she wasn't going to go down without a fight. She started doing her own detective work, determined to find the proof she needed to get Tom Couture in court and herself out from under the fraudulent loan.
I was determined. I got teased. I got made fun of. I lost my marriage. You know, I sat up literally all night drinking coffee, you know, piles of paper surrounded, making phone calls all day.
Becky gathered information for years, but she could not find an attorney to take her case. She needed new evidence. Then finally, after 8 years of relentless searching, Becky received the further evidence of fraud she needed.
I called the title agency and I said, I have to have these papers. They sent me some hard copies of stuff I wasn't even supposed to have. And thank God they did, because I got to the bottom of what they did. I had, or on the back actually, it shows that I had cars that I never owned, and you can go through the B&B and know that I never owned a Grand Prix or a Cougar. And they're saying I owned a 2000 Grand Prix and a 99 Cougar paid outright, and they're worth about $30,000. I didn't own those cars. And my name was Rebecca Weesey, but here it says Brenda. They kind of forgot as they were forging who they were signing.
And you
So
recognized right away, this is 8 years after the fact, that that's not your signature.
that's not my signature, and it's not even my name.
Well,
And
what
it's-
was your reaction when you figured that out for the first time?
I called the police and I made a police report because this is new discovery, and I was told I needed new things in order to pick this back up with an attorney. I took it to an attorney, and they basically told me, you know, what do you want us to do? That was 8 years ago.
Statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations. You need new information. If I would have had this in 2001, or the day I went to every attorney in Akron, the first year, the first 6 months that I was fighting this, the first day I fought it, if I would have had this piece of paper in my hand, that loan would have been void. But because I found this 8 years later, it doesn't mean anything, and it's fraud, but it means absolutely nothing because I didn't find it in time. Somebody hid it from me. And I lost everything because of this piece of paper and this man and these banks and what they did. And they just tell you that there's no way that this could happen to me. And it did.
You may think Becky and Addie's stories are exceptional, but cases like this were increasing with alarming frequency. So much so that they were beginning to get the attention of the state capitol. Former Attorney General of Ohio, Mark Dan, was elected into office around the same time that Addie and Becky had been caught up in their respective scams. I went to ask what he remembered from that time.
Well, for me, a couple of things were happening. One is in my private law practice, because when I was in the Senate, I was also continued to represent individual clients. I was seeing more and more people in loans that just didn't make any sense to me. Then right after I was appointed to the state Senate and then ultimately elected, foreclosures were starting to spike up. And that's what really showed us that there were, why are these loans that were only a year or two old all of a sudden immediately going into foreclosure? And that didn't make sense. And why were they concentrated in certain neighborhoods, including neighborhoods where minorities predominated? Why was that the case? And so those are the kinds of questions that we were asking.
Before long, it became apparent that this outbreak of foreclosures was ultimately the consequence of a predatory lending epidemic that had washed over the entire state.
Brokers were initiating the fraud all the time, literally knocking on the doors of homes in Akron or in Cleveland and saying, hey, you know, your house is worth $90,000, even though you only owe $30,000 on it. And this is a house that perhaps they bought for $20,000. Here's what I could do. I'll write you a new loan. Your mortgage payment's going to go down, and we're going to wrap in all this credit card debt that you owe as well. And don't worry when this loan adjusts, because if for some reason your rate starts to go up, you just call me back and I'll write you another one. And that's a cycle that went on and on, to the extent that people were getting rich. I was getting calls in my private law practice, and then ultimately later as a state senator, from people who wanted to be mortgage brokers, but they couldn't get licensed because of their felony convictions. That was the kind of people that the mortgage industry was starting to attract.
Understanding there had to be a law enforcement response, Attorney General Dan went to work.
When I was sworn in, I gave a speech about how if somebody was going around with a gun to people's homes and stealing the equity in their homes, stealing the money out of people's houses that constituted their life savings, that we would have a massive dragnet, and we would shut down all the highways and we'd go capture those guys with a gun. But just because people were doing this with a calculator and a securitization plan didn't make it any better. We brought in experts not just from law enforcement, but we brought in folks from the state auditor's office, and we took advantage of the expertise that other folks in government had in this type of regulation and oversight, and brought them onto a team together to try to piece together some prosecutions of these predators.
A task force was assembled in Akron, Ohio, investigating the same epidemic of foreclosures that had plagued both Addie and Becky. Attorney General Dan sent one of his top investigators, Tom Murphy, to lead the team.
The Akron police chief, we had a sit down with him because he had a couple of people on the task force. He wanted to know what his people were doing. Were they out here just having lunch or what? We said, no, we hit this one street and we got $1 million in loans off of that street.
Huh.
That street's not worth $100,000.
Right. Here's the evidence.
Here's the pictures. Yeah. This house sold for $100,000. That's not possible.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Huh.
And he was just flabbergasted.
Wow.
I got it. Enough.
It had been 9 years since the days of the task force, but the team was more than happy to meet up to share what they remembered from this investigation.
It took a whole lot of learning and a whole lot of fighting. Sitting in that. I mean, it got frustrating at times because you did have a bunch of people who absolutely knew nothing about mortgages.
A bunch of guys just want to go out and slap cuffs on people and throw them off to jail. And we just weren't, we had to go through all the records and check all the crap, put it all together, put all the evidence together, which took years, months before we could go slap cuffs on somebody.
Once we really got into this and saw the money flow, how much was flowing and where it was going, I have not seen anything like this during my career in law enforcement.
The first question the task force set out to answer was how so many houses all over the city were selling at prices much higher than they were really worth.
The appraisal was not only, just a little beneath or a little above, it was thousands, tens of thousands above. Then the government appraisers would go out with us and they would appraise some and say, there's just no way. This is total falsification here. The first appraiser to actually come clean, we had been looking for payoffs and we could not find any payoffs in it. And he explained to us that it was actually repeat business. And he said, once I could not live with myself anymore after I did this a while. And if you look, once I told him I'm out, I'm not going to do this anymore. You will see I no longer work for them. I went from 6 figures a year to about $28,000, $30,000 a year, legitimate business.
Apparently, fraudulent appraisals were in demand in the local mortgage market. So much so that the only appraisers getting business were the ones willing to play ball. As the task force drilled down into the appraisers' records, they found that a particular company kept popping up in conjunction with these inflated appraisals: Evergreen Homes. Evergreen was a local mortgage company run by a guy named Dave Willen. Keeping a low profile, the task force monitored Willen and quickly discovered that nearly everyone he'd sold a mortgage to was somehow ending up in foreclosure.
We started looking at people who were legitimate buyers and were foreclosed on very quickly. And they even told us, I think they sent my paperwork in, and I told them, I can't afford this. And they said, you'll be able to. You'll be at the end of the month, you'll make $200 or $300 above what we need you to pay for this balloon mortgage payment. You'll be fine. Well, within 2 years, they weren't fine because the payments got greater. They were still making the same. They got foreclosed on. It was the legitimacy of these businesses.
The key with Mr. Willen was that with each house, you're finding the same people making the repairs on the house. You have the same people selling the house and the same people appraising the house. As time went on, the houses would be foreclosed on. After foreclosure, Mr. Willen would go back and buy the same house that was foreclosed, cosmetically make the appearance of the house look to be more valuable than what it was, and resell it to another victim. And it just perpetuated as time went on.
With each foreclosure and eviction, Willen had a house to recycle into the same scheme, but Willen himself wasn't actually a lender. During this time, it was common for companies like Evergreen to act as a sales rep for a local bank, getting a finder's fee for each new mortgage that they sold. So ultimately, the actual lender was the bank. Of course, to avoid any kind of red tape, Willen's bank happened to only be a bank phonetically.
Well, this was Carnation Bank. And the surprise was they were right here and 2 blocks from us. Well, God, we could just walk down there. The one guy, Steve, loved that McDonald's coffee, so we'd come over here all the time. You recognize the one car, it's here all the time. We knew the names, and what they were doing is packaging everything up. They were training their people to do the documents. They had to change the numbers so they could get a mortgage.
Carnation Bank was actually training its employees how to forge documents, inflate income, and get the appraisal numbers that they needed. Even the forging of signatures was not uncommon.
At one point, one gentleman there, I expected the answer to be 2 or 3 times. And we said, how many times did you change documentation on paperwork to make the loan application fit so it would be approved? And the guy looked right at us and said, I don't know, maybe 200 times, maybe that. I was shocked. I was expecting an answer of either I didn't do that or 2 or 3 times. He said, I don't know, maybe no more than approximately 200 times. So this guy falsified 200 different loan applications, and that's one person that worked there.
It took about 10 months where we knew for a fact that Willen and Carnation Bank were part of the organization. We had a missing link. What else do you need for a transaction? A title company. So once we realized that was the triangle we needed, then everything really fell into place. You have David Willen, who's the brains. You have Carnation Bank, who did the mortgages, and you had the title companies involved, and there's your organization.
The entire fraud scheme was now in full view. Evergreen Homes was actively selling predatory loans all over Akron, loans that were provided through Carnation Bank. They used crooked appraisers to inflate the home values and a crooked title company to give their stamp of approval. Then once the homes went into foreclosure, Willen would buy them back for tens of thousands less than what he sold them for and reset the trap, getting the home back on the market for the next unsuspecting victim. The task force had finally strung together the whole picture. The only thing left now was to pay Evergreen a visit. So describe this place to us. What was this location?
This was Evergreen.
From an just an outsider's point of view, I'm looking at this place and it looks pretty legit.
Oh, yeah.
The location does.
Well, what the hell? It was legit at the time. Nobody was stopping them. I had to have all of my uniform people ready to go. We want everything that has to do with Evergreen. We went in this door. Went right downstairs, spread out. They were just shocked. They're surprised. It was like a narcotics task force the people that don't know it's coming. And the idea is to do it fast. Don't give anybody any chance to think about anything. Lock the office down. Grab the phones. Everything. And all of a sudden, it's over.
And Willen?
Oh, yeah, he was here. We wanted
brainchild.
we wanted to make sure that he was aware that the Summit County law enforcement was interested in him. We didn't want him to think that nobody loved him, and he just thought that he was going to get away with it. He didn't have a clue.
The team conducted a similar raid on Carnation Bank. After confiscating the company's computers, they were able to sift through all of the employee emails.
And you can go by date or subject matter. What are they sending emails about? When was this loan made? Who made it? And then just look before that. What was said on the computer? Now we have documented evidence. We had the bad paperwork. We had the loan going out. People write the damnedest things in email.
Perhaps the most disturbing thing they uncovered was evidence as to why so many foreclosures were happening in neighborhoods like Addie's.
We want to know who they were targeting. They were targeting, in many cases, minorities. So where did you get that? Now, we knew that was happening, but you have to prove these things.
Right.
And now we had their employees who wanted to back up from this and get away from it. And, they wanted their meeting at the foot of the cross and wash themselves of this whole thing. They knew it was wrong. They did it. They were employees. They did it.
You would have to wonder why lottery machines are prevalent in our community. You would have to wonder why there are so many places that sell alcohol. You would wonder why so many churches are located in a small geographical area, because the people have no hope. They're living day to day. You know what? I'm going to sign this paper because my roof is leaking and because my stairs are crumbling. Those companies preyed on not just the people, but they preyed on the circumstance the people were in.
Too often, it's not told that it's minorities they're targeting, because nobody cares. I cared. And it also, if it was a felony 3, in some cases, it made it a felony 2, because you're targeting minorities or the poor, or people that can't fight back. And we have an interest in that.
The raids on Evergreen and Carnation Bank resulted in a 147-count indictment. Willen was ultimately convicted on 69 counts, including mortgage fraud, securities fraud, aggravated theft, theft from the elderly, and ultimately racketeering, otherwise known as RICO.
These guys actually thought we weren't going to get them. And it was probably 4 or 5 months in. It was just, we're going to get them. This is just a matter of time now. And we did.
For the Summit County Task Force, the Willen case was a job well done. But there was still one thing that they had never managed to figure out. When they raided Carnation Bank and confiscated everything from computers to false documents, they never actually found any mortgages. It was Carnation who'd ultimately issued the loans, so surely they would have been in their possession at the time of the raid. But they weren't. So if Carnation didn't have them, who did?
So they were totally doctoring all of the loans that were being originated through to be able to get the loans approved, and then they would bundle these and they would sell them to the next
sell them
player.
out to California.
To California, okay. So that would lead it directly to Countrywide, I would imagine.
Right.
Among others. But
among others.
Countrywide. The same national mortgage company that sold Addie her loan was also buying up bad mortgages from Carnation Bank. And while it wasn't clear what any multi-billion-dollar mortgage company from California would want with a bunch of bad loans from Akron, Ohio, what was clear was that Evergreen and Carnation were involved in something much larger than anyone had realized.
It was Countrywide in one of the cases, but there were other companies. So this whole country is going under because of this. And then as this thing started to grow and grow and grow, the AG and I had some discussions on where we would go from here. But I have no jurisdiction in New York, no jurisdiction in California. So I was ending here.
The entire mortgage fraud problem, it was so massive in the whole country. And unless you had task forces in every major city and every county, you'd never be able to stop it. I mean, we had a huge case, but the bottom line is that we didn't do anything but touch the tip of an iceberg.
As the reality of the situation became clear to the team in Ohio, other state attorneys general began arriving at similar conclusions. And it wasn't long before they realized that what each had thought was an isolated outbreak of fraud in their respective states was in actuality a national epidemic.
We were dealing with a contagion. I'm talking to people in Washington and Minnesota and Texas and Illinois, and these are the actual states, and New York, and we're comparing notes. Well, this is what we're seeing. What are you guys seeing?
Nevada was very bad. California was hit. And some states suffered more than others, but there were no states untouched by this.
The business model was churn this volume out, put this stuff through, as many loans as you can possibly make. And when they start to go belly up in 2 years, refi them again. And how are you going to refi them? Well, you're going to come up with an appraisal that says their home is now worth $200,000 instead of $130,000. And how are you going to get a $200,000 appraisal? You're going to make it up.
We started to hear from people that they were actively told, don't worry about giving us facts and don't worry about what your income is. We'll just fill the numbers in.
And we saw this. They would take a bank statement, that was someone's legitimate bank statement, and then they would just take a different name and address, paste it on top of it, and now it's that person's bank statement too. Tracing of documents up against a Coke machine or up against a window. Whatever it took in order to close that loan is what happened.
Forging documents wasn't just something practiced by a few bad apples like Carnation Bank, but it apparently became the MO of the greater part, if not the entirety, of the U.S. mortgage industry. But what in the world would motivate any mortgage company, much less an entire industry, to put so much effort into making loans that they knew would never be paid back?
I don't think anybody saw it at that point. So I went to a colleague who was one of the masterminds behind the tobacco suit. And he's a really creative, thoughtful thinker. And I went to his office and I said, well, I'll just run something by you. Here's this company. You think I'm missing anything about how this works and what we're doing? And he said, how do they get their funding?
See, what you have to understand is that they weren't really mortgage companies. They were sales companies. It just so happened that the product that they were selling was subprime loans. That was their sole motivation. Their motivation was to close the loan and to sell it because there was a hunger for the product that was being produced.
Right, and the demand is coming from somewhere above.
Somewhere above.
And so we're trying to figure out, kind of like Columbo in the old TV shows, why in the world would somebody be going door to door in the south side of Akron trying to originate loans on houses for $100,000 on a house that anybody who lived in the neighborhood would know was worth $30,000 or $20,000 or $15,000. And the reason was there was such an incredible demand on Wall Street for those loans.
We followed one particular loan here in Akron that was bought by Goldman Sachs. And a phone call was made and we tried talking to these people. They talked back to us like we didn't know what we were talking about. Wasn't too long after that, we saw Security and Exchange Commission was looking into fraudulent loans and it started naming the different banks on Wall Street, and one of them just happened to be Goldman Sachs.
Wall Street was making a killing off of selling bundles of mortgages called mortgage-backed securities, using mortgage companies as sales agents to bring in as many loans as possible. It's an admittedly complicated process, but you may already understand it better than you realize, because it was the exact same racket being coordinated between Evergreen and Carnation Bank.
What Evergreen was doing was just a smaller version of what was happening nationally. Loans were originated without much regard to the ability of the people borrowing to repay. They were then packaged with other loans. The stream of income from those loans was offered to investors as an investment that ultimately was doomed to fail. They did exactly the same thing. It just was done at a much more complex set of transactions and done by people who, God forbid, anybody would think would commit a crime. Somehow it's easier for people to think that somebody in a plaid sport coat in Akron is more likely to commit a crime of fraud than some guy in a $1,000 bespoken suit on Wall Street. And what we learned in 2007 and 2008 is that's completely untrue. In fact, the opposite is true.
About March of 2007, I start to see a new kind of complaint. I'm in trouble. I can't pay my loan and I'm going to be foreclosed upon. And so I start to figure out that we're proceeding to the next phase. We put out an invitation to every attorney general's office in the country in July of 2007. And we said, come to Chicago. We want to talk about foreclosures. And so we did. And I was one of the speakers at this event, and we had some industry people come, and we said, there is a storm coming. There is a tidal wave coming. All of the fraud that we understood had been occurring is now all going to start coming to light. We knew something was going to happen. We didn't know how right we were.
Breaking news here. Stocks all around the world are tanking because of the crisis on Wall Street.
We're down 1.7% here, a loss of 37.
The stock market is now down 21%.
We're now down 43%.
This market is as volatile as you'll ever see.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen. It was an historic day with Wall Street shaken to its very foundation.
Could another bank blow up? Is there another major surprise for us? It's definitely possible.
The center of all of this economic crisis, again, as you pointed out, is this housing crisis and foreclosures. 8,000 to 9,000 people every day are filing for foreclosure.
Now, Lois and Claude Parker are losing their Orion Township home due to foreclosure.
This has been our total life. We got married at 23 when we moved in this house.
When you get an eviction notice, it's one of the worst things that can happen to you. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to survive?
The mortgages started going up. My 401k, my bank account, my card, the only car that I bought myself. I had to get rid of that to pay for the mortgage.
I wish I could do a lot more. The only thing I can do for you at this particular moment is to give you this check and wish you the best that this gets you somewhere. And I'm sorry.
And so with $1,500 in exchange for clearing out, David, his brother, mother, and 2 dogs joined the 600,000 Florida families who've lost their homes since 2007. 5.5 million homes lost nationwide.
The foreclosure crisis swept across the nation like a tidal wave. And for those of us who lost our homes during the market implosion, it was impossible to know which way was up. All you could do was take a deep breath and try to ride out the storm, hoping that when you landed, there'd still be something of your old life left to salvage. And it was while we were all trying to regain our bearings that the narrative started. The one that insisted the blame for this entire mess didn't belong to any lender, financial institution, or fraudulent business practice. No, the blame belonged to us.
Let me ask you this. Do you feel sorry for the person making $20,000 who has no skills, dropped out of high school, maybe fathered a couple of children, and they would like a nice house, but they can't earn enough money to buy it?
They started getting little houses that they couldn't afford, but they couldn't pay the big evil bank back when things got tough because there is no pot of gold. At the end of the rainbow, there is nothing.
This is America. How many of you people want to pay for your neighbor's mortgage that has an extra bathroom and can't pay their bills? Raise their hand.
How about we all stop paying our mortgage? It's a moral hazard.
Well, why did you know you couldn't afford it? You've got a loan officer telling you you can afford it. They then have you pay for an appraisal, and the appraiser came back and said, well, the house is worth it. So I've got all these stopgaps, It must be okay.
People always want to blame the borrower. The borrower doesn't get the appraisal. They were told, here's an independent, third-party professional opinion from a licensed, appraisers are licensed by the state of Iowa. They're licensed by all of the states. This is their opinion on the value of your home. Oh, okay. If my home is worth that, then I'm safe in borrowing this. This is okay. They were lied to.
They were targeted. And that's the first thing you learned about this whole subprime experience, is that people didn't go find these loans. The lenders found them.
Nobody understands that. They think you only lose homes if you don't pay for it, or you lose your job, or you won't work, or it's not the case. I paid for my home. I worked. I could afford my home. I could afford twice that much. But I lost my home, not because of money, because of fraud only.
When you're looking at the type of person Addie Polk was, or you're looking at the type of the era in which she came, you trust banks. You don't trust anyone else. You trust banks. You trust them. A person should not be considered an offender, or they should have been smarter not to put themselves in that situation. They put themselves in that situation because they trusted the bank.
I don't think there's any question in my mind that everybody involved, from the originators of the loan to the investment banks, knew or should have known that the loans that they were originating and the bonds that they were selling were fraudulently originated. And that, in fact, was a criminal conspiracy. And if they didn't know, then they're the dumbest bunch of financial professionals that I could ever think of. It's hard to argue that these sophisticated MBAs and Ivy League educated Wall Street investment bankers just didn't get it, that this was all going to fall to pieces. What they knew is that if they could move the ball fast enough, pass that hot potato fast enough, that they'd be able to cash their check and not have to worry about what the consequences are.
This wasn't an accident, okay? This happened because of the products and the practices that were occurring in the mortgage market. This is a man-made event. That's what you can't forget.
This is an integrated system. This is something where Wall Street is actively involved in making this occur. It's not some passive relationship here. They are a team. This is a unit.
This was a serial, systematic enterprise using all the prestige of the Wall Street machine to do it. Now the question was, and sadly we never got there, is how do you prove that conspiracy and bring everybody into orange clothing like they should have been?
That was the question, especially for Mark Dan. And that's because out of this entire calamity, his task force in Akron were one of the few, if not the only team of investigators to successfully get a criminal conviction in a case of mortgage fraud.
We did it in Ohio on a very small scale. Unfortunately, to scale this required the resources that no state government, no local prosecutor's office is ever going to have. There was only one entity in the United States that had the resources to do that investigation. It was the FBI and the United States Department of Justice, and they clearly had no interest.
The United States Justice Department has announced that it's not pursuing criminal charges against banking giant Goldman Sachs.
The FBI Criminal Investigative Division ranked mortgage fraud as the lowest ranked criminal threat in its lowest crime category.
No Wall Street prosecutions. Why were there no bankers in jail?
Well, there were bankers that did go to jail. I think people are concerned that the very high-level bankers didn't go to jail. But I think you have to understand that if we could have made those cases, we certainly would have. And as I left the department, I made suggestions to Congress about changes in the law so that a situation like this would not repeat itself.
Oh, well, I'm sure if you told Congress, then everything will be fine next time.
From the perspective of the man on the street, what they saw was effectively immoral behavior. But although it might be immoral, it's technically not illegal.
Some of the most damaging behavior on Wall Street, in some cases, some of the least ethical behavior on Wall Street, wasn't illegal.
I'm trying to think of an appropriate way to say this, but that's just bullshit. The argument that the behavior of the people on Wall Street and those that were stealing people's home equity was just unethical and not illegal is complete bullshit.
You know, people will say, you know, well, nobody knew what was going on with subprime loans. You know, nobody knew what was happening. Baloney. We did.
We were the only cop on the beat. And I think in retrospect, the real question is, why the hell were we the only cop on the beat?
The will to prosecute that crime at that scale just simply didn't exist. At the end of the day, certainly they could have turned their attention to the perpetrators of this fraud, just like we did in Ohio, and they just chose not to.
I'd want to know who they were having lunch with, because they weren't having lunch with me. We saw it. Who are they having lunch with? Who are they making the laws for? I don't know that. And I'm not pinpointing somebody. I'm just saying, what the hell happened? What almost put this country under? Are you kidding me? I don't know. Do you guys feel the same way about it? What went wrong?
What went wrong is just one of many unanswered questions the stories from Akron have left me with. If the Summit County Task Force was able to convict a local mortgage fraud ring on 68 criminal charges, including RICO, why wasn't the federal government able to do so anywhere else? And if the country's largest financial institutions were committing such high levels of criminal activity, how had they been allowed to get away with it for so long? I came to Akron in an attempt to understand a broken system. But the deeper I went, the more it began to look like a system that was working exactly as it was intended to. There may never be justice for Addie and the millions of Americans like her, but that doesn't mean there can't be answers.
Will Addie Polk be to foreclosure what Rosa Parks was to civil rights? When the sheriff's deputies knocked on Addie Polk's door, she knew it was time to go. Knowing of no earthly shelter for herself and her possessions, Addie Polk chose to end this earthly life to dwell in the house of the Lord. Addie Polk discharged that bullet to end her suffering, never realizing it would reverberate through the halls of Congress. Addie Polk's action speaks volumes about the devastation, frustration, and despair of those who have been victimized by predatory lending practices.
When things don't seem right, they're not right. And in this particular case, when you start looking at the things that led up to Addie Polk shooting herself, they don't add up. Addie Polk is 89 years old. Why would you give her a 30-year mortgage? And then why would you let her roll that mortgage over into another mortgage and give her more money? How much time to pay back a loan does she really have? So when you look at the circumstances surrounding Addie Polk's mortgage, when you look at the person she was, very responsible person, that says, I believe Addie Polk did not know she had a mortgage on her house.
This investigation has just begun.
this dramatic increase in mortgage fraud cases was the canary in the mine. It was the warning.
This was money chasing people. This was not somebody looking for a loan.
The person who sold you a loan made more money if they sold you a higher rate loan.
What if he doesn't have a job and doesn't have any assets? Fund him.
I think it was AmeriQuest had people who were bragging, you can come in at 9 o'clock and have a loan by 5 o'clock, because they were going back and manufacturing all the paperwork.
If I don't do it, the guy down the street will just make the loan.
They were sold a lie.
AmeriQuest and its brethren were salespeople for the money that was coming out of Wall Street.
They're selling to their very clients these loans that they know are a disaster.
It was all designed to maximize profits for all of the different players.
They put our money in investments that they knew that there would be a huge loss.
States like Nevada started saying, wait a minute, this is gambling.
And it became very obvious that this was all part of the same puzzle that was falling apart.
When no one's enforcing the law, the criminals take over.
This looks like a conspiracy. This looks like a scheme to defraud.
They just generated all this junk, took home huge bonuses, and then when it collapsed, they said, oh, not us.
We as prosecutors knew and understand what our job was going to be. We were waiting for the leadership to say, go. That never happened.
The investigation was suppressed.
The rule of law ceased to exist. This is the largest conspiracy of lies in the history of the world.
Well, welcome back, folks. Let me go ahead and stop this right quick. All right, so that was episode 1.
I wanna kind of start only because every time I see an episode of The Con, and I've seen episode 1 a number of times, but the first time I saw episode 1, it was back in August of 2022. And I've been around a long time. Okay. I know what crooks do. I know what neighborhood thugs do. I know what crooked politicians do. And I'm watching this. And I'm like in awe. And the reason I'm in awe is because I'm seeing all the things that I've thought about my entire life. How does this corruption continue and continue and continue? Now, everybody says it. Everybody says it's all about the money. Sure, it's all about the money. But They do not look at all the facts, all the ways, all the people that did what to whom, how criminals, young people who just maybe were working in fast food or maybe doing maintenance or in a car place or whatever, okay? They would be offered this job. Oh, come on, you can work in the office and we'll show you how to do all this stuff. Well, you've got people who understand what you need to do, what the rules and regulations are in order to qualify for a loan. But that doesn't make any difference to the criminals who are hiring all these young people, and they're telling them, do this, do that. And what do? They listen to their boss, right? And they close a loan and they get more money than they made all last year. They're jazzed, right? Hey, man, I got to keep doing this. Now, some people can do that. A lot of people can't.
No, it eventually catches up to you.
Right? But there's a lot of people who can do it. And what were they doing? Those people on the phone, those young people were making a lot of money for themselves. They didn't see Addie Polk times a million. They didn't see all the people that they were participating in this whole process to kick out of their homes. But then it's even, that's awful, disgusting, illegal. But
Yeah.
Barack Obama says it's unethical, but it's
not illegal.
Illegal.
That's
He's wrong.
yes.
He's wrong. Okay. They were coming into your house with contracts and pens and calculators, and they were stealing from you, making money, taking those loans that they had and selling them to somebody else so that they could repackage them and sell them to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where were they getting the money? The financial geniuses on Wall Street. But look, man, first time I saw this, it all came together. I consider myself so lucky. I've been able to meet on the phone a lot of the people that were in the con, talk to them, get to know what their feelings are. These are honest people, honest public servants who wanted to do their job. And the system said, What is it? Who's making the money? Somebody up at the top is making the money. And they just lie. They lie. They took an act, Federal Reserve Act 13.3. They took that act, meet over 90 times in secret. This is during Obama's time. Oh, let's use this for emergency lending. Now, we know these guys are no good and they're selling garbage. But you know what? We can't let them fail. So because we are the United States and because we have our own currency, what's called fiat currency, by decree, that's not backed up by anything, no gold, no chicken livers, nothing, that full faith and credit of the money that we use from the government that is supposed to be ours backed up criminals. And people suffered and died and got kicked out of their houses and lost their pensions and committed suicides, and God knows how many other terrible things happened. But look, all of this because of a law that was put in for emergency situations. And during the Obama administration, Mr. Hank Paulson knew that they should not be using this in case of, unless it was a major emergency. What? Because Lloyd Blankfein can get a bigger salary, because Jamie Dimon can get a bigger salary, because all these people can get bonuses. They were saving people who had money, who knew how to do all these kind of financial machinations. They were saving their butts. They didn't care about the American people. They didn't care that Addie Polk shot herself 5 times and suffered for another few months before she died. Anybody care? Anybody do anything? Who's talking about this? Anybody talking about this?
No, the only person I can see is ourselves and Patrick.
That's right. Patrick's out there. I've been out there. Okay. Look, the truth must get out to people. I'm really pleased tonight because we had quite a number of views on Twitter Spaces, and I want to keep doing this. I want to keep having conversations. And so now, Jay, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and you tell the audience how you felt when you saw episode 1 of the con.
Well, I had a few different feelings. One was sadness. Oh, wait a minute. Give me a minute. Oh boy.
Let's see you, Jay. Come on. We want
Hold
to
on.
see
I'm getting you. I'm getting you. I gotta.
want to see you, kiddo.
All right, here we go.
There you
So,
go.
I mean, the first thing I want to say is I felt sadness for Addie Pope, you know, and all the other people who went through this. But then it went from sadness to anger, you know, as the episode continued and we started to, you know, things unfolded and we started to see what was really, you know, happening and how it was, you know, this big Ponzi scheme. And, you know, then I got angry, you know, because no one should have to go through that. Like, you know, it is something terrible to be thrown from your home, you know, to be evicted. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced that, but, you know, I remember as a child experiencing that type of situation, you know, once or twice, you know, and it's demoralizing, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, these people worked hard, you know, and they, you know, lost everything. And it wasn't because of fault of their own. It was because they were strategically set up. And, you know, next week when we watch episode 2, we'll actually get to see how some of these weren't even setups. They were just straight up fraud. I mean, doctoring, you know, paperwork and such, you know. And so, yeah, that's what I felt. I felt angry. I felt sadness. And I felt like, you know, it's time to do something about it, you know. And I know some people will say, oh, well, this happened, you know, in 2008, whatever have you, but it's still going on today, you know. And I want to bring in Pat because, you know, he's been at the forefront of this. You know, he's been the crusader and, you know, we're just along for the ride. And so I want to again introduce, you know, our viewers to the producer and filmmaker of the con, Patrick Lovell. Go ahead, brother.
Well, thank you, Jay, and I appreciate the fact that you got angry from, obviously being empathetic to a horrible story, but you bring up a great point. It's like this happened a long time ago. So let me just throw a couple of questions at you, Jay. Do you think a majority of people that are on the side of Donald Trump's got to go to prison because he's an existential threat to the United States of America, that the case in Alvin Bragg's Southern District of Manhattan that presented the case of falsifying business records and defrauding the American people that led to a grand jury conviction of 34 felony convictions, the only ones we're going to see outside of Donald Trump being found guilty in the civil fraud trial, of which falsification of business records were used to give his company basically the death penalty in New York City. This is Donald Trump, the face of New York, based on The Apprentice and all of that stuff that happened throughout the years. Donald Trump using fake media and all of its glory to be able to perpetuate what? Legitimacy? And then all of a sudden, that's relevant. Now listen, Jay, this never ended. Not only did it not end, we gave the people that did this tens of trillions of dollars illegally to buy the United States government. Do you think I'm making that up?
Absolutely not.
So here's the thing, Jay. Are we a nation where nobody is above the law?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Now, Jay, based on what you saw, which is the only RICO conviction in a crime that shut down the global economy. Now, just so you know, David Willen, that was an $80 million a year fraud. That wasn't small potatoes. But in comparison to what I'm talking about, in 2006, 7, and 8, we had a housing bubble of $4.5 trillion. But guess what? The derivatives bubble that went global was $800 trillion. $800 trillion. There's 1,000 billion and a trillion. Now, Jay.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother.
Do you remember a few months ago when everybody was kind of like, whoa, Donald Trump's going to go bankrupt. He's going to have to hand over all of his property in New York because he's going to have to come up with the collateral because, he got the civil rights or civil fraud trial for $450 million, right? You remember that?
Yeah.
By the way, did he give up any of his property as collateral that you know of so far?
Not at all. I think
he was. By the way, it was reduced to about $175 million to pay off to be able to keep his properties until whatever comes next in the process. Which he was.
Yeah, he was supposed to be getting a loan.
Guess what
he never
happened?
got the loan.
Guess what happened to Wall Street when they were bankrupt?
They got bailed out.
How much did we give them?
Well, you said what, about 71 trillion?
That was eventually over the course of
the time. Well, what did they get?
The way Obama went on 60 Minutes to tell the country that what Wall Street did as a constitutional lawyer and expert said that what they did was unethical but not illegal. And as you saw, what did Mark Dan say that was? The former Attorney General of Ohio. What did he?
Bullshit.
He said it was bullshit. Okay.
Yep.
We had a thing at the moment, in 2008-9 where Congress, the dysfunctional Congress that we had, supposedly pulled off miracles reaching across the aisle because they had to save the United States. They came up with what was known as TARP, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, which was $75 billion, or what am I talking about? $700 billion. most Americans at that time, their jaw hit the floor. We could not understand what the hell was going on. And we were like, oh my God, $700 billion to free up liquidity, which is short-term, ability to meet the short-term debt. That's basically capital to meet short-term debt. We didn't give him $700 billion, as Roseanne politely pointed out. There was 98 secret meetings where they came up with Federal Reserve Act 13.3 that was created for the Resolution Trust and the Reconstruction government-sponsored enterprise in 1932, after we created the Federal Reserve, to be able to get us out of the Great Depression. That also led to Glass-Steagall, which was supposedly supposed to prevent this sort of gambling with other people's money for the rest of history. But we changed that through deregulation that led to this dog and pony show where Mr. Change we can believe in came and sold us a bag of goods that we were going to come up with $700 billion to be able to save the global economy. But no, we gave them $33 trillion in 2009. And then we gave them another $16 trillion in quantitative easing, which by 2016 is $49 trillion for about maybe 100,000 people in the financial industry. Do you understand why we have disparity of wealth? Do you understand why we have billionaires up the wazoo who got to do things like buy our government and social media and media to make sure nobody would understand our financial system is a racketeering enterprise? Now ask me how I know.
Because you were there, you uncovered it and you went
Because
through
I
it.
found the truth in Ohio that displayed that the whole thing was a racketeering enterprise. So if we have the law, what should have happened, Jay?
They all should have been put in prison.
Should we have given them $49 trillion?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and that wasn't the end of it. We gave them another $22 trillion in 2019. Then we fucking, during Mnuchin, who got away with all of these crimes, burying all of the Adipolks in California, that Kamala Harris allowed to get away with it, became the Secretary of the Treasury, which was the only caveat to Dodd-Frank that said that we would never do this again after 2009. But not only did we do it again, we never stopped, because the Secretary of the Treasury was the only caveat. And what a surprise. It was Steven Mnuchin during the Trump administration. Now, we had to fucking bail shit out during COVID. And we also had shit tons of PPP loan fraud. And then last year, Biden used the same trick to bail out the billionaires in Silicon Valley for their own stupidity, which led to Peter Thiel basically giving us J.D. Vance to railroad his bullshit. And then ultimately, his involvement with everybody's favorite liar, fake Bill. He's a real billionaire on paper because of all the government largesse and backstop that we've given to Elon since 2008. Are you starting to see the picture, Jay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm sorry I'm yelling. I can be.
No, man. Listen, bro. Sometimes you gotta.
I can talk. Dude, I've been doing this nonstop for 2.5 years because we let this truth out in the con, and we got quashed, catch and killed by the powers that be that cannot allow the people to understand this. Our media is exactly what the liar-in-chief Donald Trump said, fake media. What do you do when everybody fucking lies, Jay?
Man, shit, you got to go out there and put it out there yourself. Do exactly what you're doing, what we're doing, and that's why I thought
Does the truth matter, my brother?
Absolutely, the truth
Why
matters.
does it matter?
Because it shall set you free.
Should the weakest amongst us be murdered by a system that has unlimited backstop?
Absolutely not.
Was that why we had the American Revolution? Is that why we had the Civil War? Is that why we plastered the fucking Nazis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is everybody sitting on their ass?
Because, for one, they don't know. I'm telling you now.
Because they're fucking cowards.
Yeah,
Wake
well, that's
the fuck up is what
they're comfortable. They're comfortable with their TikTok videos, and they're comfortable with their, whatever bullshit they're fucking,
Look, man,
doing.
we can all pretend like things are hunky dory, that we're going to go back to normal because Kamala Harris is a very thoughtful, beautiful, elegant professional who's not Donald fucking Trump. I get it. She let Mnuchin get away with this shit. They work for the fucking Borg that has complete control, that we continue to give tens of trillions of dollars to for fucking betraying the United States and being above the law. We gave $71 trillion on the low end. Let me ask you a question, Jay. How good would your life be if you could make all the dumbest decisions in the world, and not only would you never be held accountable by the law, but market forces would never hold you accountable, and the bank would give you fucking free money, endless credit for the rest of your life? Would that be a pretty great existence?
Yeah, I'd be doing pretty fucking well. I'd be
Is
doing a
that
lot better than I'm
capitalism?
doing
Is
right
that
now.
capitalism?
Absolutely not.
No,
Absolutely
capitalism
not.
is risk reward. If you make
Absolutely.
stupid decisions, the market punishes
You pay for it. Yep.
Yeah, but that's not what happens. So what I'm trying to get people to understand, my brother, is that you don't live in a capitalist system. You don't live in a democracy. The rule of law is not equal. We all fucking know that. So what I'm trying to get people to do is pull their head out of their ass and find some fucking courage and join us and lock arms to purge the misery of tyranny like our fucking founding fathers, even though they weren't perfect. And then ultimately we can fire hose the MAGA zombie apocalypse and the corruption or the fascism it fuels. We're right on the verge of fascism. But what I keep telling people is we have got a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses the full faith and credit of the United States to guarantee the mafiocracy, which is effectively socialism, that is now giving us fascism. So America, please, I'm sorry to fucking yell. I'm sorry to use expletives. I just want you to fucking live true to what we put down on paper and wise the fuck up.
Nah, man, that sometimes I told you earlier, sometimes you got to be bold and loud and boisterous and people will start to listen. I mean, that's how Trump got that's how Trump got as big as he got, because he just went up there and he just spewed a bunch of bullshit and he screamed and hollered and and people love him for it, but at least we've got,
we
got
have
the truth.
Yes,
we've got the truth on our side. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
And so,
listen, dudes, we didn't show you regular people fucking telling us what they learned in college or professors that gave you some sort of theorem. We were working with the Attorney General of the state of Ohio, who had criminal powers through a sophisticated white collar task force that they did the job, which you get discovery. You put the law, you put it all together, you put it in front of a jury, and they got convictions on racketeering. That's how the legal system is supposed to work. And as we go through the rest of our series, you'll see that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we go all the way to the top. And this is exactly what BlackRock and all of the major financial centers of power cannot have. And this is why the media has been lying to us nonstop. Now, was the only con the housing blow up? No, that was the biggest one. They've been doing it nonstop ever since. We've had zombie companies. We've had, the real estate operations operate the same way, but commercial real estate is really been blowing up left and right for the last year based on all the same sort of scenarios. But what the people need to understand is what we've been giving is trillions of dollars to the richest amongst us because it's free money for them based on bullshit collateral that they give to the Federal Reserve, that the Federal Reserve was spending $180 billion a month on, purchasing their fucking assets. Dude, that's it. It's the con beyond comprehension. It's the whale that walks into the casino that makes the dumbest decisions in the world, blows the whole thing up and then comes back the next day and we act as if they never lost. We just give them more money on the house.
Don't work that way.
No.
Well, it works that way for these big criminals, okay? What Trump did was all the fraudulent criminal practices. He did all those practices, falsifying business records, just like you saw where Mark Dan and Tom Murphy and their group, what they found the same thing. Trump is doing on a small scale what all these, we like to call them financial terrorists, have been doing through Obama, through Trump administration, through Biden administration. All three of them. They keep using Federal Reserve Act 13.3. Okay? They keep using it. That is illegal. Who's going to stop them? Are the folks in the Department of Justice going to stop them? Are FBI agents going to stop them? Well, even if they did, guess what? We've got judges who are on the take. We got attorneys.
Hey, wait, let's ask a question there real quick. Does anybody not think that judges can be corrupt? I mean, we all know the Supreme Court is freaking corrupt.
They are.
Absolutely.
And everybody sees it. So why, in the name of goodness, can people not wrap their head around crime so gigantic that has screwed, raped, pillaged, killed millions of people? Why can't people wrap their head around it?
Look, let me give you another version of that, Roseanne. So yesterday I'm listening to the New York Times and a podcast exploring why and how and all of the different pieces of Gavin Newsom following up on what SCOTUS said now can happen. It gives the right to the governor to be able to clean up the homeless encampments, right? And so these two young journalists are like asking questions like, okay, well, what's causing all the homelessness, right? And they're coming up with the standard stuff like these guys can't hold down a job. They've got drug problems, marital problems, mental problems, all these other things. Oh, no, yeah, by the way, there's an affordability crisis. People don't make enough money to be able to afford the living in real estate in California. So what happens? Yeah, meanwhile, they don't have a clue that we have been providing tens of trillions of dollars to this system to hyperinflate the assets based on what we just showed you in the kind, which is part of what's known as control fraud. And to give everybody an understanding, we had the savings and loan crisis back in the late 80s, 90s, which was the first version of this. And my mentor, William K. Black, who was a top criminologist at the time working for the Office of Thrift Supervision, put it all together, and the government came up with 1,700 arrests of elite white-collar bankers. And that was for a crime that was 1/180th the size of the great financial crisis. But, oh, yeah, it gave birth to Donald Trump. At that time, there was a guy by the name of Michael Milken. Some people might remember his name. He was involved in junk bonds, and the junk bonds were involved with Taj Mahal. And Michael Milken got nailed for RICO. Now they lowered, the charges. He eventually, goes off, but he becomes Mr. Billionaire after the fact, who's like walking in, lockstep with Steve Mnuchin. Steve Mnuchin was using his private jet a couple of years ago when we had a government shutdown that he couldn't use his own government jets to get around. So he was using Steve Mnuchin's jets. That shows you the revolving door and the largesse. We just continue to give, literally, it's the dumbest thing in the history of the world. I've got to say it again because nobody seems to get it through their fat heads. If you make stupid decisions, if you lie, steal, and cheat, you're not given a high credit rating. But if you get caught by somebody, especially a bank regulator, somebody, do you think that you don't go to jail? No, you go to jail. But
absolutely.
In this case, you do it times millions and tens of millions of felonies. They give you tens of trillions of dollars. It's that simple.
If you're one of the big boys, you get whatever you want. Okay. Not only do they keep fueling, they fuel constantly fuel the big boys. And then they reward them too. Oh, here.
Did you guys see the comment that I made when you know, we were talking about all of the different stuff in the context of, oh, wait a second, when Obama said it wasn't illegal, and then who was the guy that they showed right away? I was like, who was that guy in context of VP Harris and ultimately what she just did?
What the
It was
the
former AG Eric Holder and Eric.
Oh, yeah, Eric Holder. Yeah.
Decision for Kamala. And oh yeah, by the way, we showed you the AGs of Minnesota, which of course, Tim Walz came out of. Do you think Tim Walz would say, oh yeah, no, billionaires are supposed to get free money by breaking the law and destroying people? Do you think
absolutely
he'd, oh, yeah,
not?
that's cool.
No, absolutely not. His
Okay, so
career would be over.
Who amongst us is going to go challenge him?
Well, we all have to. That's the whole point. Like you said, we got to get down to Washington, D.C. and have a movement. Like this is what I'm hoping that we can, start here. Begin the start of waking people up to what's really going on. Because I still don't believe that people can wrap their head around this sophisticated con. It's almost like they wiped out the mafia only to become the mafia themselves, being the government. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
what happened. That's exactly what happened.
They were able to see how the mob ran their organizations, and all they did was destroy them only to begin to use the practices that they use. And they're able to get away with it because they're rubbing elbows with the politicians.
They're not rubbing elbows, dude. They own them.
Yeah, for sure.
Firms. They work for the same financial firms. It's the revolving door. They came out of the same schools. It's a conspiracy based on the aristocracy, dude, which is just the opposite of what we're supposed to be.
Well, Patrick, let me ask you this: how many since the Obama administration up until now, which hopefully will be the Kamala Harris administration, how many billionaires do you think was created from 2008 till now?
Well, much more, but I'll give you an example. Private equity had something like 4 or 5 billionaires in 2005, I believe. Now there's like 382.
Wow. That fucking is a huge number.
Surprise. That's what happens when you backdoor trillions to the system, dude.
And to take it to a personal level, I sold my house. I made a little bit of money, but I had to pay off my mortgage, pay off all my credit cards. People don't realize how buried they are.
Yeah, no.
Until they can't buy one more thing, because if they do, they can't afford the payment. Okay, so I pay off my mortgage, I pay off the credit cards, and I go and I move into a community of 125 units. And most of the people living there, we had young people, old people, veterans, disabled, seniors, every kind of person you could think of lived there. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, it was the first place in my entire life. And I just moved there this past year. At 74 years old, I never felt more of a sense of community like when I lived with these people. Okay. That's one thing. But the other thing is this: these folks came pretty much straight from rehab, the streets, some kind of shelter. All of them did. Okay. And when you come straight from the streets into a place of your own, it's a real adjustment. Okay. You are not automatically like really friendly, or you don't really want to participate in stuff. You don't want to help clean up. You don't want to share, do this, do that. You tend to want to take what's in front of you. Okay. And I never blamed them for that. It's just that I couldn't be mother to 135 people.
Yeah.
I was only one person. And
Yeah.
I love them to death. And I've still, since I moved out, I've still gone there because I used to cook for them every week.
Yeah.
But you don't simply take people from the street and put them in a room with a bathroom, television. It doesn't work that way. These folks are ill-equipped to be able to make their own doctor appointments, take their medication. They don't know how to cook for themselves. They really are at a disadvantage, and they need someone to kind of be their helping hand.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can do that. That's called case management. Okay. I could be a case manager for a couple of people, but I couldn't be a case manager for 135 people. Now, I can cook for 135 people. That's not a problem. I could cook for 200-300 people. But to give these folks the counseling, they'd come to me. Oh, Miss Roseanne, what can I do? When you see a community where people really, they care about each other in a way that I can't explain. You gotta live there. You gotta see how it works. You gotta see what's important to them. And you just connect with them. I never felt uncomfortable. Never, ever, never. And for me to share my facts, the information, the truth of how all the terrible things and the solutions to the terrible things are encapsulated if you look at the blueprint of the con. You look at the 5 episodes, you've got the blueprint, and what we need to do, I believe, to the best degree that we can.
Absolutely.
We have to gain the trust.
Yep.
People.
We got to piss them off, get them fired up.
We have to piss people off. The comfortable ones we piss off.
Yeah.
Okay. The ones that really need our help, we get them to trust us. It's not the same thing to bring different groups in.
Yeah.
You can bring in different people than I can, than Patrick can. Okay. And Monday, I'm going to Chicago to just kind of stick my nose in the Democratic National Convention and see if we can't make it great like 68. Because I was in Chicago in 1968 with the Democratic Convention. Now, Richard J. Daley is gone. He was kind of like the terrible guy. I didn't want to call him all kind of names. He was like the terrible guy of the Democratic Convention because he told the Chicago police, shoot to kill.
Wow.
Well, and the whole world was watching. Okay. And I remember it. So now at this point in my life, I got to go there and I got to talk to people and I have to show them no matter what your cause, whether you're for Medicare for all, prison reform, affordable housing, Gaza, Palestine, no
Reparations.
matter what. Reparation, right.
You know,
No, exactly. No matter what cause, what's the root? The root is the money that's being given illegally. Cut
Yeah.
off their money.
Yeah, absolutely. And what infuriates me the most is that they give all this money to these crooks, and we subsidize Elon Musk and all these other corporations and companies. You know, Walmart, their workers get food stamps because they're not being paid properly. But then, you know, we have the audacity, like these MAGAs, they have the audacity to say, oh, people want handouts, you know, they're welfare queens and this, that, and the third. And it's like, bro, the people you follow, yeah, the people you praise all day long on Twitter and this guy that you're following like he's a cult leader, these are the very same people you're talking about when you say welfare queens.
He's
You know
a
what I'm saying?
welfare. He's a welfare
Absolutely.
queen.
I mean,
That's
absolutely.
right.
You know, Tesla,
That's
all
right.
of his companies have been subsidized by taxpayer dollars. But it's a problem if we want to give people, you know, $25,000 for first home owner, you know, a first time home owner, you know, program or what have you, you know. So, yeah, man, like I said, man, listen, I'm glad that I've met you and Pat, and I'm willing to do what I can do with my small platform. You know, it's not the biggest. I'm trying to grow it every day, and we're getting there.
We
You
are.
know,
We are.
you know, and like I said, you can go and watch the con. You can go watch all 5 episodes tonight if you wanted to. I mean, it was so interesting, and it was like I've seen it, and I wanted to. I was like, man, listen, I'll play episode 2 tonight, but I understand people have things to do and such. But you know, they can go and watch it by themselves if they want. But I would encourage them to watch it here with us for the next 5 weeks, because you have the producer, the filmmaker, you have the guy who's been on the ground pounding the pavement. You have the architect of the truth. And, you know, and once we're done discussing, you know, these episodes, we also want to talk about something that, you know, is, you know, in the works, which is called the Clean New Deal. And, you know, Patrick is the architect of that as well. And so, you know, I would love to, you know, give the floor to him. Maybe he can talk about that a little bit if he wants to. Maybe, you know.
Can you hear me, Jay, or no?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, first of all, bravo to you, man. I'm just so grateful that we met you. Really appreciate you as a person on the other side of the street.
We're having a little bit of difficulties with your mic.
One second. I'll just take care of that. Just 1 second.
We get him back.
Yeah,
He's back.
we'll get it back.
Yeah, he's back.
Yeah, I'll just,
There he is. There
I'll
he is.
just say this in closing for right now until next time, because
Okay.
well, thank you so much for your interest, but more importantly, your participation. But you're seeing it right. And tonight I just kind of experimented with being Mr. Volcano guy, right?
Yeah.
Because
Loud.
I'm sick and tired of people listening to the intellectual sort of you know, what is the academic stuff? You know, we're normal times, we can debate issues. No, people, just literally shut the fuck up. We're providing you the revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, that has perverted our markets, that has perverted our law, that has perverted every aspect of what it is that we are supposed to be. And people are so frightened or overwhelmed, or just quite frankly, they don't feel confident, or maybe they just don't think anything can change, right? And they want to leave it up to somebody to, you know, hopefully save us. And like in this particular case, yeah, Kamala is a much better choice than Trump. But at the same time, we've got to maximize on this time. And like I said, we've got to go after the Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to state the question. Dude, is it okay if billionaires get trillions of free money, destroying our country illegally, and the money that we're giving them is illegal? It's that simple. How would he respond, Jay? How would he respond? He'd laugh and he'd be like, "What are you crazy?
Yeah.
That's not what we would do. I'm sorry, 10. Of course, that's what we do. That's exactly what we do. Stop pretending like we don't do that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Okay, guys, are we going to be concerned about the Supreme Court? Well, we should. If it were me and Biden, I would have waged war on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's taken backdoor money from billionaires to weigh in on decisions. Given what Americans are so weak and cowardly compared to what we used to be. When I was growing up, something like this would happen. Are you kidding me?
Oh my Lord, they would have been in the streets. I mean, look at what they did to Nixon. It was the movement that essentially got him to resign. Right. You dig what I'm saying?
There's a reason there's a marble statue of Abraham Lincoln, in Washington, D.C., who says, "A nation of by and for the people shall not perish from this earth." People, it is our time. There's a reason Martin Luther King sacrificed his life, and it's on the other side of the reflecting pond, who said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But they all were willing to give it up, right?
Yeah.
They were all for what? For liberty and justice for all. In this generation, people are like, oh, wait, let me just take a look at some chick shaking her ass on my TikTok feed.
Absolutely, brother. No.
So you don't really deserve a vote. And then, by the way, all these MAGAs, right? They couldn't give you a fifth grade interpretation of what our civic capacity is, what the structure of our laws, how laws work, what the judiciary is, what the separation of powers. They shouldn't, in my mind, and I say this sarcastically, but I say it for every MAGA who hears this, you know less about the country than the immigrants that you implore or deploy.
Yeah. Or you want to run out of town.
Yeah, go screw yourself, man. Learn something for once. So if you want to be on the side of fascism and Nazis and everything else, you're my enemy. Why?
Absolutely.
Because I'm an American. So
absolutely.
Who should not be afraid to say that right now? Hundreds of millions of us. The American character should matter more than anything else. And I'll finish up with this, Jay. Okay? For everybody listening and for everybody who's going to hear this recording, whenever they happenstance on it. Look, I learned a long time ago, Jay, that we got two poles of our soul. Okay? On one side, you've got character, integrity, courage, decency, dignity, right? That's what the American soul should be. On the other side, you've got in a direct opposition, complicity, duplicity, hypocrisy, and all-out lies, right? My message to everybody out there, stop lying, stop buying lies. When you live in truth, you live in light. When you live a lie, you're depraved. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. When you live a lie, inside you die. The United States cannot function as a lie, and the hell if I'm going to let it be that way. So excuse me, like Steve Martin used to say on Saturday Night Live, excuse me for making you feel uncomfortable while you sit on your ass and do nothing. Nobody's coming to the rescue, except guess what? We did. I gave you the $71 trillion truth for free. And what do people do? Oh, you know what? Like this guy on the thread. Hey, dude, you know what? Our story is much bigger than your story. I'm like, okay.
And then you ask them what it is, and then there's nothing here. Listen, my thing, I'll end it with this, and then I'll let Roseanne do her thing, and then I'll ask you guys to stick around while I do the outro and say goodbye to the folks and thank them for tuning in. We'll be doing episode 2 next week. I'll let you guys know as soon as we have it set up, the date and time. We'll get that to you. And like I said, please, I encourage you to go watch it on your own if you want. Like Patrick said, it's perfectly free. So you can go watch it at your own leisure. But like I said, I would ask that you watch it with us, because then afterwards you get to talk to the actual person who was on the ground doing the hard journalistic work to put this whole thing together.
People to ask questions too, Jay, if we can.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we deactivated the comments tonight, or we did something because we didn't want to be barraged with racist stuff and all that jazz. So what I'll do is for the next episode, we'll have to figure out how we can do like a half an hour Q&A or whatever have you, because I think that's what we need. Like, we need to get the interaction going, because these people just want to sit behind their Twitter Twitter, handles and Twitter,
And you can't do that.
keyboards, and just think they can Twitter their way through this. And I think it's got to be much bigger than that. Like Patrick says, we got to get down to Washington. We gotta ruffle some feathers, peacefully.
Never before. Look, everybody out there, especially those that tend to be a little bit more activist, they're like, oh yeah, we've been like this since the beginning of our time.
Yeah.
No, we haven't. I mean, we've had problems the whole time. Guys, we never provided tens of trillions of dollars to people that broke the law 100 different ways, and we had the evidence to prove it. That's never happened before in history. Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was never used before in the manner that it was in 2009 to pump $33 trillion in, again, illegally, and then ultimately the other $16 trillion in quantitative easing. I can imagine just some, just academic freaking altruist where he sits behind his cloistered in his academia going, yeah, well, these guys don't really know all of the different plumbing, and they're not giving us the ABCs of all of the different emergency stimulus, and they don't know exactly what the bullshit we don't. Not only that, I know exactly what the control fraud was that created the racketeering that delivered everything that we're engaged in, because I made the goddamn con. That's what the federal government, to a tune of $90 billion a year, that's their job, Jay. That's what the Department of Justice and the SEC.
They're not doing their job.
It's their job to make sure that corruption like this doesn't get to go unchecked.
Yeah,
and
right.
I want to thank you for doing this, and I know they quashed it, and so then you gave it for free, and people still aren't watching it, and so
Right.
I felt like it was my duty to bring it on my show, and for at least the time that we've been on the show, we got 89 people, 90 people to watch it. They watched the first episode, and if that can just get 5 or 6 people who will say, hey man, you got to check this out, and then it's just a wildfire. It spreads like like a forest fire, and that's what we need to do, and I'm here for it. And like I said, we've got 4 more episodes for the next 4 weeks, and I'll be back with you guys whenever there's something to discuss and talk about. And again, I will go ahead and let Rose say her piece, and then we'll go ahead and get this wrapped up.
I just want to say, share all of Patrick's material, share my material, share Jay's material. Do it.
And tell everyone where they can find you.
They can find me. You see that name? Roseanne Rabiola Miele. If you Google that, you can find my Facebook, my Twitter. Patrick Lovell is locked out of X at the moment, but he's simply Patrick Lovell 1. But if you follow me and you follow Uncle Jay Podcast on Twitter, you'll find us, okay?
Yep.
And you can watch the whole con. Just type in thecon.tv.
Yep, and it's there for you for free. Yeah, do it. I go for it, and then come back and watch it again with us. You know what I mean?
And I want regular people to stop, being complicit in watching our country be destroyed within by the corruption of cancer, the cancer of corruption. It literally is up to us. It's up to us. We cannot descend further than we already have. And it's going to get monumentally worse if Donald Trump wins. But I'll finish with this. Again, like I said earlier, and I can't wait to hear this myself, because I'm curious how loud I got and if it made any sense.
Oh, man, you were amazing. And I told you earlier, sometimes that's what it takes. It takes somebody to sit back and say, man, this guy's a maniac, but he's fucking telling the truth. You know what I mean? And so, I'm all for it, man. I'm glad that you're willing to put yourself out there. You've got, Elon is after you. You've got the powers that be are trying to crush you and quash you, and they don't want this out.
I am the biggest threat.
Absolutely.
To the people who own our country and who've betrayed us for the last 15 years, if not 23 years. I mean, this is out of hand. And you know what my message to them is? Look over your shoulder. We're coming.
Absolutely. We're the new mod squad, the 3 of us, and we're going to grow this thing. Again, you can reach me at Uncle J Podcast on Twitter, also at McDaniel, McDaniel 0207 on Twitter, and I'm also on YouTube. Tune in. Go ahead. Did you want to say something, Pat?
I didn't say anything.
Okay. Yeah. So just, keep paying attention to, my Twitter handles. I'll be, putting out the promotional information for the next show. I want to thank everybody that tuned in. We had a really big crowd. I appreciate you. And, keep up the fight.
Failure is not an option.
Absolutely.
Onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards. Thank you so much.
We need a renaissance, a rebirth, a remix, repeat this, a reintroduction, conceive this, a whole new genre to breathe with, a reproduce, so smooth on the mic and the light, my own moves, give it life, and right from my own view, words mature and then grow groove, I was soul improved, work on me, wake up in the morning just to work on the beat, so intuitive, that's how I gotta be, when I'm in tune with the room and the God in me. It's true, never lose that. I never come through with a loose rap. Tighten up, time to enlighten them, striking like lightning and hope I don't frighten them. Boop. Recited for you to get you excited and hype. Move with the rhythm tonight, beautiful type. Women in my inhibitions, I'll move to the side. Music's my only religion, surrounding myself with only musicians. Only the best, solely uplifting. With this combination, my music is infinite. Ideal situations, stimulate them. Wanna inspire and motivate them. My goal is take them to a higher level, let the pain escape them. It's euphoric, are you for it? I promise I know you have a use for it, so let's use it. Get into it, no matter what we call it, it's soul music.
Thanks for tuning in to the Uncle J podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch us next time. This is Uncle J.